Welcome, everyone. I'd like to begin by introducing the title of our presentation today. It's called Turning the Tide. Is it possible? How can it be done? And the presenters today are Joseph Bianco. He's Professor Emeritus at the University of Melbourne, and myself, Maria Karidakis. I'm a lecturer of applied linguistics at the University of Melbourne, and we'll be exploring the maintenance of the Greek language in the Australian context. Now, language is often ascribed an important role in the creation and maintenance of cultural and ethnic identities. So in a situation of cultural contact or migration, preservation of linguistic identity often becomes important for maintaining or reconstructing group identity. So let us think about the makeup of languages other than English in Australia. Now, Australia's linguistic diversity continues to grow. We've got 22% of the population reporting speaking a language other than English at home in the 2021 census. Now, interestingly, 19 of the top 25 languages used at home were non-European languages. We've got a snapshot here, and we can see that Greek remains relatively high in the ranking of most spoken languages in the country. And this is actually regardless of a reduction of approximately 7,600 in the 10-year period between 2011 and 2021. So Greece is ranked 6th as the most commonly spoken language in the country, following Mandarin, Arabic, Vietnamese, Cantonese, and Punjabi. Now, the figures for cities with the largest Greek communities are encouraging when considering the top 10 languages that are spoken in these major cities. So Greek ranks first in the Northern Territory, third in Victoria, fourth in South Australia, and seventh in Tasmania. So this ability to understand and speak Greek has been a sign of community belonging from the Greeks' earliest presence in Australia, and it was viewed as being very important by most migrants. And, you know, Tamas talks about this, Tamas 2005 talks about this in the context of education and upbringing of children and grandchildren. Now, despite this emphasis on language maintenance within the Greek community itself, there is evidence that facility in Greek is declining, and many younger individuals, they do not have the fluency that their elders hope for. Now, as we can see in this table here, this is evident as the 65 plus age group is the one which has the least shift to English, while the 35 to 64 age cohort has recorded, you know, the highest shift to English. So research has found that members of the second and third Australian generation, for them, English tends to be their main language and the one in which they're most comfortable operating in. In practice, this means that their Greek may be limited to some understanding, some passive understanding, along with the use of specific expressions like terms of address or specific phrases. Despite this, the cultural use of Greek remains an important behavior, and this identifies the speaker as a member of the Greek community, and it's really central to the individual's sense of identity. Now, going back to these figures, it's encouraging that the younger first generation cohorts have a lower shift to English, and they might be the offspring or children of recent Greek migrant arrivals to Australia after 2011. However, more needs to be done. The Greek diasporic communities are following the trends of other migrant groups. We're seeing the dominant pattern of transitioning from minority languages such as Greek to the dominant language English. And this is leading to a steady fall in speaker numbers and difficulties in language maintenance. Now, I'd like to hand over to Joe, who will talk about how to reverse and our attempts in reversing this decline.
Thank you very much for that excellent introduction, Maria. Basically, Maria has set out the broadest context for the situation of modern Greek in Australia today. And I'm going to talk about the initiative that has been taken, which we call Pharos, which was initiated by the Modern Greek Teachers Association of the state of Victoria some years ago, who commissioned me to do some research on this and to develop a plan for revitalizing the language intergenerationally. So this is what I will be describing now. Okay, so prior to setting up the research, we had to ask the question, what is the theoretical lens that we're going to use to understand the phenomenon of Greek and its presence in Australia, given that large migration countries all around the world show the same pattern of steady loss of immigrant languages. And what we see with this is that Greek is no different, perhaps slightly slower in the attrition rate than some other languages, but what I'll describe later as the three-generation pattern is broadly true, and Maria gave evidence of this earlier. So we have to ask, what is the theoretical lens to do this analysis? And we chose the field within sociolinguistics called reversing language shift. I'll describe that in a few moments. And consequent on that, we had to ask, what is a realistic expectation of learning outcomes from the typical school second language programs that exist for English dominant Greek students? Because if we're going to reverse the trend that's been identified, we have to say, is schooling enough to do this? And then the third question that we posed is, what is the proportion of students who gain or maintain Greek who will pass it on to their children? Because learning a language at school and using it in the home are very different phenomena. So we chose this model, which you can see in the middle there, build capacity, create opportunities, and foster desire. We abbreviate that as COD, capacity, opportunities, and desire. The vision that we had in this modern Greek strategic plan was to expand the use of modern Greek in the home and its provision in school settings, so to secure it for future generations to come. And we do this through this three-stage pattern of capacity building, opportunity creation, and fostering desire. Capacity refers to the ability that people have to learn the language, the level of proficiency that they acquire. Maria spoke a little bit about that, but this is a really critical variable because we know the greater proficiency that people have, the greater propensity they have to use the language. In other words, the more you know, the more likely you are to use it. Then the creation of opportunities. This is very important because we know that not only is the number of speakers declining, but the number of settings and domains in which the language is used is shrinking. So it means there are fewer opportunities to learn the language by people who know it less well. So this actually suggests that over time, there will be a serious crisis coming. And what's really fundamental to all of this is the desire of young people, not only to identify as Greek Australian, but to identify as Greek Australians who use and know the language. And that's a different thing from just a general identification. So that's more or less the outline of the strategic plan. It's a very complex document, but this is the summary of it presented here. So the principle underlying this is that there have been many examples around the world of successful revitalization of languages, whether they're indigenous languages or immigrant languages. There are many examples of this, and we studied these in preparing our own plan, the COD, and we chose that model based on the best examples of what's operating around the world. So restoring languages that are languishing in education and being lost at home to being reinvigorated with new methods that are appropriate to the technology-enhanced world in which we live. Now, fortunately for Greek, the starting base is high, as we saw from Maria's data of the cities in which Greek is a prominently spoken language. So it has a large community of speakers, many institutions that are sophisticated and want to be involved in searching for solutions, and many committed professionals. So our starting base is high and promising. We meet on a regular basis. We have a working party. We're all volunteers, and we basically work at all of those levels, creating opportunities, improving capacity, and fostering desire. For example, we do seminars for parents. They're mostly attended by mothers who come along and they want to be able to build and use more Greek in the home, even if they themselves are not very proficient in the language, or if they feel they're out of touch with contemporary Greek as spoken in Greece or in other places. And these Raising Children Bilingually seminars, which are whole day training seminars, show them methods and techniques for doing this, even if they themselves don't feel very confident in the language. There's a lot that they can do. We're boosting numbers of Greek student enrollees at university. We're combating the tendency in many schools to close down language programs. So we're constantly working at all of these levels, lobbying, doing research. We've got a major research study that we're about to publish in a couple of months. And we'll be presenting this at the National Pharos Conference on the 2nd of December this year at La Trobe University in Melbourne. It's a national conference, as it says there, because we want to issue a national plan expanding this Pharos working group, which started in Melbourne, Victoria, onto a national basis. There's already a chapter of Pharos in Sydney. There are regional ones in country Victoria, the state of Victoria, and interest in other states. So we're hoping to issue a national plan at this conference in December. The 3G problem that I mentioned at the beginning confronts all migrant languages, and it basically means that in the first generation, that is between the first and second generation, the original migrants and their children, there is a loss of use of the migrant language of between 3 and 20%. Greek is in the lower range of that. Some languages like Dutch are much, much higher, but it's still quite high. And in the second generation, that is the second shift phase between the second and third generation, that is the second generation has lost the language and they're unable to raise their own children in the language. So the loss there becomes very great, between 40 and 60%. So that's extremely high and troubling. And it works like this. Basically, the original model was developed by Professor Joshua Fishman in New York in the 1960s and 70s. So it's a global pattern that's been validated in many, many places in the world. In the first generation, the home language is dominant, so it's a Greek dominant household. In the second generation, it's bilingual, with parents using Greek and children responding in English or in a bilingual format. And in the third generation, the children themselves are raising their own children and only in English. So that's the pattern of attrition. That's why the language planning model, as we call it, is to improve decision-making at the family, school, and community languages levels to reinforce multilingualism, and specifically Greek in this case. So family and individual work, mostly with mothers who tend to attend our programs, although there are also some dads that come along, some grandparents who want to help with how they can foster a better use of Greek among their grandchildren. So it's a wide range, intergenerational, very practical focused activity that we do every few months. Then we work at the community level, creating opportunities. We're working with businesses, trying to get them to invest in language programs. create immersion opportunities, support visits to Greece, etc. And then very importantly at the school level to stop the closure of programs, to put in place bilingual programs rather than just second language programs, and to build other aspects of academic language, literacy in Greek, etc. So that's the overall plan, and I thank you for your attention.